There's something missing from my life. Something big and poorly constructed. It's that piece of crap spray booth that used to be back there.
On the whole, this thing didn't need much help falling down, but I did spend a bit of time disconnecting it from the wall and the trusses, so I only pulled the spray booth down. I'm not going to show you much of this because I did some seriously sketchy stuff here, and I don't want to be a bad example. I really only filmed it in case my family needed to know how I died. To prepare for pulling it down, I put a sling around the top of the booth and attached a log chain to it. The other end of that chain will be attached to a come-along, which you'll see a little bit later. In the meantime, I had to cut the last brace between the booth and the trusses because it really did not want to pry loose. I detached the header in the middle so I could pull it down in 2 parts. More on that a little bit later. I wrapped another sling around one of the building's posts and secured the ends with a shackle. One end of the come-along was hooked to that, while the other end was lovingly nestled into the cold embrace of the aforementioned log chain. That was looped back on itself to take up some of the slack. Then I started feeling cranky, and well, I'll just let these clips speak for themselves.
Woohoo!
By the way, I'd like to say hello to my honorary shop president over on Patreon, Alberto Lopez. If you'd like to help support the channel just like Alberto and all my other patrons, check out the link down in the description. I demolished this in 2 phases because the whole thing was very rickety, and I thought if I broke everything loose from the walls at the same time, it might come down on top of me. So instead, I left this back corner attached to give it a little bit of stability while the other half fell. This side actually took me about 4 times longer than the first side, mostly because one of these OSB sheets was thoroughly stuck on the post. Just like the first half, the ceiling of this one was covered in approximately 60 years worth of dust and mouse poop. I really should have worn a respirator while doing this. After some thoughtful introspection, I decided the safest way to get this part down would be to individually remove the boards that made up the ceiling. This was a cakewalk compared to getting the rodent toilet panels off, so it was a nice change of pace. The last one was pretty stubborn though because it was actually attached to the post frame of the building. That last end just wanted to splinter rather than pry off the post, but this is a good teachable moment. If you don't have enough leverage to move something, you just need a longer lever. Once that last board was out of the way, the remaining bits of the frame fell down quite easily. Lastly, I just had to remove the braces that had attached the spray booth to the roof trusses. Then the arduous task of cleaning up all this crap could begin. I separated out the individual boards in case I could reuse them later, but they were all in pretty rough shape. There were quite a few with water damage, lots more that got torn up in the demolition, and a bunch that were just too short to be useful. In the end, I just cut everything up into smaller chunks and burned it.
Look at this warning. That seems like something that should be tested.
Yep, 100% true. They absolutely nailed that warning. And look at me, I finally learned my lesson and put a respirator on. All this was done so I could get the concrete situation remedied in the back 2/3 of the shop. The floor had cracked and settled severely in several spots, and I looked into fixing it both with slab jacking and replacing the entire floor. As a side note, I had an incredibly difficult time getting anyone to actually come out here and quote the job. Out of the 8 companies that I contacted, I got 2 replies, one for slab jacking and one for replacement. The slab jacking quote came in at almost double the cost of replacing the entire floor, so I ended up going with tearing it all out and starting with new concrete. The first step was making some saw cuts in the slab so the crew could break it up into more manageable chunks. They also made cuts close to the perimeter so they could avoid damaging the posts when tearing out the center sections. The concrete ended up being thicker than anticipated, and it had some really heavy-duty mesh in it, which made removal take longer than initially anticipated. The mesh was almost entirely at the bottom of the slab, where it really didn't do any good.
There were a lot of possible reasons for all the settling that happened to the old floor. Burrowing critters, poor drainage around the building, the mole men rising up to conquer the surface world. There was just no sure way to know until we got a peek underneath the old slab. What was under there was a whole lot of sand, about 8 inches deep in most spots. That's basically the worst possible substrate you could ask for, and this was the most likely reason for all the cracking and heaving that occurred, although I'm not quite ready to rule out those pesky mole men just yet. The concrete crew had to scoop out all of that sand and bring in several loads of good dirt and rock to give the new floor a fighting chance at survival.
Once all that was done, some thick plastic sheet was laid down as a vapor barrier, and steel mesh was installed along with some slab bolsters to space it up above the dirt. Concrete is strong in compression, while the mesh is strong in tension, so ideally you want the reinforcement in the bottom third of the slab. Of course, everything sags quite a bit, so getting the mesh to stay where you want it is difficult.
Here it is the morning after the pour, and I have to say it looks absolutely smashing. I just want to strap on some roller skates, blast some Def Leppard, and relive the glory of my awkward preteen years. The concrete that was used had fiber mixed in for added strength and is rated to 5,000 psi. In case you're wondering, no, I did not put my handprints in it or scratch my name into it at all. I wanted to leave it all nice and smooth, so it's as easy as possible to move the machines onto it. The last step was to make several shallow cuts in the new concrete, so when the slab cracks in the future, the crack doesn't propagate across the entire floor. I'm going to let the new floor cure for quite a while before moving the machines onto it. The concrete guy said no less than 7 to 10 days, but longer is better.
I have other things to do like lighting and electrical work, and those will be way easier with a big open space, so I'm not in a huge rush to move everything over. Plus, I need to lay out exactly where I want everything, and I want to be absolutely sure of the placement, because I only want to move these machines one more time. If you have any questions or topics you'd like to see me cover in a future video, leave those down in the comments section below. While you're down there, hit that like and subscribe button if you think I've earned it, and please consider supporting the channel over on Patreon like the fantastic people you see on your screen right now. You might also want to check out these other videos. On the right, I have a playlist of all of my other shop update videos. On the upper left, I have my most recent video, and on the lower left, there's a video that YouTube thinks you'll like just as much as this one. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.